We all have a villain origin story. That moment, that core experience where something happens in our lives and suddenly everything about who we are is different. We call this a core wound, and it can often shape the way that we look at reality. We have this experience that makes us feel something deep, something powerful. Often it's something that's traumatizing or scary, destabilizing in some way, and it starts to shape reality differently around us. It starts to inform how and why we behave the way that we behave. And eventually, over time, we develop entire personas around these wounds, entire ideologies of who we think we are based on the experience of that one moment. In this world, when the spider bites, suddenly we get Spider Man. When we have the experience of one moment that is so earth shattering, so groundbreaking for us, it gives us this feeling of this is who I am now. I am just this. But where the light comes in is understanding that that wound is not a problem. It is a gift. It's an opportunity to actually become the sensitive person that we are. In fact, without those core wounds, we don't actually arrive at the level of sensitivity. We don't arrive with the understanding of reality that we are given based on the experience that we experienced. And the cool thing is that all of this stuff is all written in our astrology charts. I'll get into it later. Our core wounds don't have to be big or traumatizing, though sometimes they are. And for me, that is definitely true. One of my core wounds, one of my core life experiences is being a very small child, under 4 years old, with a schizophrenic father. He had many versions of what reality was and certainly was not. And all of those experiences of being on high alert and being highly aware that some of what he was creating in his mind wasn't true, but also being small enough to not fully understand what was real and what was not, anyways, to be a person who looked for signs of danger everywhere. And because I didn't want to experience that danger, I took those core wounds and I did my best to create the safety around me that I felt I needed. So I had a lifetime of abandoning things before they abandoned me. Over the course of my life, for many years, my father was institutionalized. And when I turned 13, I made the decision that I did not want to have him in my world anymore. And there were many years as part of my deep forgetting, as I call it. If you didn't hear my first solo episode, you can go listen to that for a little bit more of what that forgetting looks like. And in my forgetting and in that time, I didn't have him in my life at all, but I did do a lot of deep diving into all of the different ways that that wound was manifesting for me, all of the different ways that the pathology of that, the psychology of it was affecting me. And so I spent years in therapy talking about my father, talking about how to forgive him for the experiences that I experienced, for all the things that he had done along the way. And there are plenty of stories that I could share that for many years I over identified with. And as I moved towards the light and moved through the healing, I began to look at the story of what had happened when I was young as this beautiful gift. And so for many years, I spent every day in meditation, in my consciousness, and also in my subconsciousness through EFT and a number of other practices, literally rewiring the story that this core thing that happened to me. It's a very traumatizing thing to be a 4-year-old girl whose daddy is locked up, and then suddenly mommy is remarried and there's a new family and everything is trying to make sense, and your father is in and out and in and out and present and not present and medicated and not medicated. And then suddenly you're like, you know what? I just need some stabilization. That itself has its own story around it. And so for years, I clung to the story. And then slowly over time, through these different practices, I allowed myself the opportunity to investigate what would happen if I didn't just pathologize and stick to the story. What would happen if I started to see this wound as a gift? And so I played with it. And over time, I did an awful lot of forgiving. And in my 30s, I made the decision to go and see my father for the first time. And it was not easy. And for a number of years, when I would go to see him, I would go and visit once or twice a year and spend a little bit of time, maybe a couple of hours, and just fill that part of my soul. In the pandemic, my schizophrenic father made the wonderful choice to walk from Toronto to Florida on his own, unbeknownst to anybody. And he showed up at his mother's front door, and she was too old to navigate and put him on the street. He became homeless for 4 years. And in that time, I was able to truly relate to him differently. My relationship to him, not with him, shifted. Suddenly, instead of a girl who had been mistreated and abandoned by a father who couldn't stay on his medication, suddenly I was a woman who had an opportunity to one day find my daddy and see him again, God willing. So in 2024, I went down to Florida to go and see my grandmother days after my father's birthday. And on the full moon, the day that Saturn had moved off of my sun transiting, I called my father in. Crossing the bridge to get to our home in Florida, I screamed to the heavens, "Okay, Daddy Saturn," because if you know, Saturn is daddy. It's the patriarchy, it's our restrictions, our limitations, our boundaries. And I screamed and called him in. "I'm here. I'm home, Dad. Come home, Dad." And I went to bed in the home that he spent his teens and 20s living in. And the following night at 2 o'clock in the morning, my father showed up at our front door. Later, when I asked him how he knew, he told me that he saw my face. And when I asked him what he meant, he said, "I have extrasensory perceptions." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, in a different dimension, I could see you." It was the biggest gift. And I am aware that I could not have arrived as a person who would even call him in if I hadn't allowed those core wounds to be reworked, if I hadn't allowed myself to connect with the part of me that sees those wounds as a gift. Being somebody who had a extremely psychotic father meant that I was constantly looking to be able to diagnose other people. And now in my life, that's what I do. I get to see other people and basically say to them, "I'm not a therapist, but I can see some stuff." And it's a gift to be able to do that. A thing that I know is true is that energy never lies. And the gift that was given to me in that core wound has afforded me the opportunity to not only help others, but to also help my father. And it is such a blessing. So you might be wondering, what are my core wounds and how do I reframe them? First of all, investigate. Ask yourself, what is that moment where everything changed? The moment where you got bullied on the playground, or your mother said something cruel that landed in a really particular way, or the moment where you had a big fight with a sibling, or that you failed a test at school or was publicly embarrassed in some way. Whatever it is, just think about it. You know which one it is because it still haunts you and you can't get it out of your brain. Allow yourself to think about that moment. Sure, it's shaped some parts of you that you might not love, and those parts are really hard to not be judgmental. Give yourself grace. But it's also shaped parts of you that are extraordinary. If you were bullied, aren't you also now extremely sensitive to how other people speak to others? Don't you defend when people get viscerally ugly? You do. If you were somebody who had a mother who was unkind to you, aren't you somebody who goes out of your way to be kind? Aren't you somebody who mothers others in ways that are meaningful? If you were publicly shamed in some way, don't you then feel that you could be liberated in some way, that you actually don't need the approval of others, and so you get to just act yourself? What a gift. Each of our core wounds offer us an opportunity. They offer us a gift that lets us be who we are. We all incarnated on this planet into our individual charts, which, if you're curious what yours looks like, you can go ahead and purchase a full chart reading on my website. We came here to be exactly who we are and experience all of the things that we have experienced so that we can all learn the lessons of what it is to be human, to have empathy, to be loving, to be generous, to be kind, to be forgiving. All of these things are written in the Bible. All of these things are written in the stars. They're in every single practical thing that we study. We know, we hear it over and over and over again, but the truth is that there is a way through every core wound. There is a way to the gold inside the mud that we've been sort of maybe avoiding. And the best way to avoid it is to relate to the core wound like it's mud instead of being willing to sink in and find that gold nugget. As you can see, it takes a little bit of uncomfortability to be able to look at some of these things and be able to reframe them. And that is the work that I do. I give a loving smackdown, a little, I get that there's pain here, but have you thought about it a different way? Have you allowed yourself the freedom to maybe just rework what this is doing to you? That is the gift of psychic mastery. It is my 90-day coaching program that is absolutely a game changer. We identify all the core wounds and we dig in and we rework them with all kinds of tools to be able to give you the gift of not over identifying, not over pathologizing, and not over analyzing your own life experiences, but instead living like it's all a gift to be here. If you're curious, you can click the link in the show notes and book a call with me. And if I can leave you with a parting thought, it would be that whatever you think you are, you're not limited to that. There are infinite possibilities in this world. And when you let yourself shift the narrative and let yourself invite in possibility, the whole universe of opportunities come in. You don't have to be somebody who is shy. You don't have to be somebody who has an addiction. You don't have to be somebody who is stuck. You don't have to be somebody who has daddy issues. You can be whoever you want to be. You just have to say so. And with the right guidance and support, you can be anything you want to be. The world is just the world, and the universe is just the universe, and you are just you, and I am just Jana. You've just listened to the Just Jana Show. Whether you sat with me through a live reading or just let me talk my shit to camera, I hope something I called out landed for you. Share with me the one thing that shifted or a question you've got in the comments, or send this episode to someone who deserves to stop shrinking their light. If you're enjoying this kind of energetic reprogramming, please like and subscribe. If you want me to read beneath the surface of your life, apply to be a guest and get a live on-air reading at the link in the show notes. I'm Just Jana, and I'll see you next time.